Hey y'all, I'm currently in Gambier, Ohio. I'm in Kenyon College participating in the Kenyon Young Writers Residential Workshops. It's super fun actually. I've always dreamed of immersing myself with a group and community of like-minded individuals, of fellow poets and authors. It's actually really brilliant. There's poets, prose writers, authors, songwriters, people who make prose sound like poetry, and people who make poetry sound like prose, and all sorts of fascinating individuals here. All spit straight bars. Alright, like one of my classmates' lines that I remember is my rust is indigenous to yours. Like, what? Huh? You see what I mean. Anyways, I've had the fortune to interview my instructor, Nabila Lovelace, a published author and poet, on her experiences with writing. Now in this interview, I asked her to give some of her experiences in writing poetry and some advice that she could give us.
Okay, cool. Yeah. See you soon.
Is storytelling a means of escapism or reflection, in your opinion and experience?
I don't really prescribe to it necessarily being either of those things. I think of storytelling as a way to archive. I think of it as a way to keep history and to imagine the possibilities of the future. I see it as a way to answer questions that we might have about the world around us if we're thinking about the present. And I think of storytelling as like an ancient technology that we have for handing down both secrets, support, and possibilities of living.
I see. That's an interesting thought because I've never really considered. Okay, so you mentioned history books, right? So
I didn't mention history books. I said history. But
okay, history. So history. Well, like, what do you think is the best way to tell history? Do you think history should be like? So how I'm seeing it is there's two ways. One, so option A is basic catalog. So like if one of the pieces I wrote like for a history prompt about the sentient robot, that one, it's basically, what if a robot completely impartial viewed the entirety of history and just recorded each event? That's one way to tell history, and the other way to tell history would be through stories. Like, which do you think is I wouldn't say better, but like, which way do you prefer?
Where is the robot recording the history from?
Let's say theoretically, right?
Okay.
Let's say if in the realm of story there is a robot, this robot is sentient.
Okay.
So let's say in the future humans create like a robot that can time travel through time and space, and this robot just is 100% impartial. It just basically it records everything that happens in like a little camera throughout the entirety of time. So for instance, when Homer is writing the Iliad, or like when the Peloponnesian Wars is happening, right? There are poets writing about them and historians writing about them, and the robot is just on one side watching them. Like, and as a means of cataloging.
I have a lot of questions to look at the scenario. Who designed the robot? Like, I think the thing that is true until it isn't is that if human has intervention, then there is bias in how history is told. Even if we're talking about like a video camera recording something, we see it happening now with tons of ways that people look at how video ends up like being perceived. So for example, right, there are there can be like footage of two people fighting, and the footage, it's gonna be hard for us to hear. So we're going based off of what we see, but there are elements that we might be missing. When did the footage begin? When does the footage end? What context are we possibly missing that has to do with this? right? That recording can't get, you know? So it's why even, you know, just as like one other example, right? Like there, for a while was this advocacy about getting police set up with police cameras, right? But very soon, the same people who were organizing and had maybe listed that as one of the demands that the like local police departments and states and governments were down to say, sure, we'll do that, they realized that there was an issue. The issue was that the police camera is in the police person's control. So if the police person just has it on and we're able to then see things from the vision of his pocket, like, you know, that's maybe okay, right? But when do they cut the camera on?
Turn off body cam.
No, literally, you know, like, and that's actually what happens in a lot of really terrible cases, right? They won't put the body cam on, or the body cam will be on, and then you also have the body cam versus somebody's dash cam, and there are huge differences between what is included and what isn't included, right? So I think even with the like idea of a robot sentiently going back, we still have the fact that a robot is programmed through human intervention. So when is that robot deciding to turn the camera on, turn it off? What is it missing? Is it getting this whole viewpoint of the war? Or is it only getting some? Is it only able to get one person? Is it able to get both, right? There's a lot of questions that make it hard for me to like make a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it mostly has to also do with the fact that, and I'm sure you already know this, but there's no objective way to tell history. Like when we talk about textbooks are wildly subjective, even though they're handed to us as objects of objectivity, right?
Yeah.
And it's because someone wrote it. And even with them supposedly trying to be objective, when you read it and you read for who the subjects are and who's being ascribed what designations, who is being described what descriptors, who's being ascribed what power, in what kinds of context, all of that shows a subjectivity to how they want history to be read, right? And then the other thing is that storytelling as an intervention can often fill in the holes that textbooks or these spaces that are supposed to be objective leave out, right? But we also sometimes discount those stories because we say they are oral history, or we say that they're subjective, as if the text that like we are basing objectivity on isn't subjective. You see what I'm saying? So I kind of have a different view. I have a view that maybe we need all of these kinds of perspectives. Maybe we need, you know, the kind of false version of objectivity that at least is really working toward a kind of thoughtfulness as to the stories that they're telling, that also incorporates oral histories, that also incorporates the stories that come from that time, that also incorporates primary documents from those spaces, right? And then we maybe are able to have an amalgamation of histories told from different perspectives, and that's at least closer to the possibility of being able to see what actually happened. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
There's that one line that says history is written by the victors. However, that history is also shared by the victors. Now, do you think history as, I guess, a device to record or to catalog, or like just history itself, do you think history need to be shared, or like saved versus shared? Which do you think it should like have priority in, or like which do you think it should be like?
Can you say a little bit more about how you see the difference between saved and shared?
So saved is basically we store them, right? We like, again, humans, subjective, very biased creatures. We type them down, we store them, and that's it. Or does it need to be shared? Like, do we need to put it in textbooks and everything? Like, obviously, like to foster culture and like patriotism, you need to share it. But like, let's ignore all of that for a second and just say like, is it more important for history to be like, I guess this question is more of, would you rather have history undiluted but undisclosed, or history spread but bias, like subjected to biases?
Well, what's the point of like having it stored if no one can access it? I guess I'm having a little trouble understanding that part.
Yeah. Like that's No, you answered the question. Like yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think I was just having some like.
So history needs to be shared.
I think that's the. To me, I think that's the point of history, right? Like, I don't really understand what it would like. I don't like. I legitimately don't understand what someone would do if they're just storing it in a tower and it's locked and nobody has access to it. Because then what are you storing it for? I have trouble understanding what the end goal of that would be, right? So that's the only reason why I'm like, I kind of only see one possibility, only because I don't understand what the other, like what the reasoning behind the other would be, if that makes sense.
What's a poetic device you feel is very underrated?
Ooh. I'll come back. I like that question.
Many poets borrow elements from either like folk tales, personal stories, or cultural, like larger cultural stories or narratives. Like, how do you decide when a story is just yours to tell, and when it's yours to listen to?
I think it's what comes, right? Like, I am a writer that believes in coming to the page with a blank slate. Not everything I write down is a poem that's going to be shared. Like, I am a hand-to-hand writer. And sometimes I write things and I'm like, oh yeah, this feels as if it wants to be a poem. And I then type it up. And then that's like my next bit of process, right? And then from there I'll revise, right? And I, of course, am, especially these days, like very principally oriented. So, you know, I generally am in a piece being pretty thoughtful about like, I'm not a hero. So it's a whole lot of like, there's a lot of introspection about the world, and that like, we're all kind of fucked up, right?
Yeah.
And how do we still find a way to live among and in community? So a lot of those are questions that continually pop up, right? Like, and yeah, I feel like for me, it has a lot to do with both, is this poem ready to dive into, you know, has this poem found its vehicle? Has this poem found itself, right? The poem is done, and the poem knows what it wants to be, right? Way before I do. That's why it's so easy for us to fuck things up with the poems. But my job as the writer is to try and get out of the way of the poem, right? If we're talking about like, you know, whose stories we tell, whose stories we don't, I think it's always about what are your stakes in this story, right?
Wait,
if you're writing something and you don't have stake in it, like in the actual piece, if there are no stakes for the narrator who's in this, then why am I writing it? If I don't have stake, then I damn sure shouldn't be.
What do you mean by like your stakes?
So, let's see one of these pieces. The field guide poem for how to pioneer the Midwest.
Yeah.
Right?
One of my favorites, yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Grace is both considering this kind of vantage point of living in the Midwest and the landscapes and the degradation and the exploitation of the land that has happened here, but is also considering the fact that this is a space for tons of produce and growth in that way, right? Like you know, these aren't things that are in the poem, but when you hear him talk about his writing, you find out that he grew up on a farm. You find out that he's very intimate with the process of making things grow and changing things into something that other people will be able to buy or have produce in, right? So his stakes here are both the consideration from a space that he knows, thinking about the agricultural life and what that does to the ground, right? But also thinking about the fact that he wasn't the first person here, thinking about the fact that this is an exploited land, right? Those are some of the stakes that come with being somebody who is squarely understanding of this space, but also gets that they aren't the only people who exist here, right?
Yes.
And so we have stakes, right? We have stakes of like, I'm writing about a place, but how do I write about a place and be honest about the fact that I'm not the first person to live here? Because that's part of the stakes of living in any place, and especially writing about a place, right? Really, the stakes for writing about places, what is my place in this place, right? And how does my place in this place possibly take away from someone else too? Both of those are questions that bring gravity and stakes into the poem of writing about place. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's one way of considering stakes, right? I personally, right, may not actually have stakes if I'm, maybe I'm writing a poem about some NBA player who I don't really know anything about. What are my stakes in this, right? I have to find a way to have stake in it. Otherwise, what's going on, right? There's a really cool writer named Ross Gay who has a whole book called Beholding, where he writes about this like one scene, right? This like one moment that happens between Dr. J and somebody else, I can't remember, but it's like when Dr. J does this infamous skyhook, right? That he becomes so known for. And for Ross Gay, it was this like incredible moment because it was like, he looks like he's flying, he looks animated. But in the long poem, we also see Ross Gay putting in the stakes of what it means to be a viewer, what it means for these to be commodified bodies, even though they're paid well, right? What it means for this man to be able to do these things, but to also live in a world similar to how Ross Gay has to walk around, where you also are being judged by stereotypes because you're living in this world. So what does it look like to both be able to defy gravity, but also to be weighed down by the gravity of others, right? So that's personal stake for him. And we get his personal stakes in there, even as he's continuing to bring back this recurring image and bring back this recurring figure, this popular figure, right, of Dr. J, right? We saw it in the Crimson poem too, how that writer is talking about his brother, but the stakes are also what happens to him as a family member, right? His stakes in that poem are also like, this is my brother and this is Rodney King, and I am here too. The writer is in there. We weren't able to get to how the writer is in there, but the writer's stakes are in there too, right?
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit more understanding of like what it means to be considering something and writing from a space where you have stakes in it. And that changes what you end up being able to write about in good ways, because then you're not writing things that maybe aren't going to be empathetic, maybe aren't going to be thoughtful, right? Maybe are going to only work off of stereotype and aren't going to actually allow for a complex understanding or thought process about the human experience. Yeah.
When you're talking about stakes and the how to pioneer the Midwest scene, we talked about like how he pretends he hates it, but really he like through his words, it's like he loves it. I don't think love and hate is like mutually exclusive.
Right.
Because like I forgot what the poetic device. I forgot what the device's name is called. But basically, I really want to describe Dr. Grace as he hates to love his home and he loves to hate it at the same time. Like, yeah, it's very sweet. It's very sweet. So
you read the book.
Ooh.
Because then you'd have a broader possibility of being able to consider this.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't. Like his other, okay, this is just from personal opinion, but I didn't really like his other poems as much as like the Pioneer the Midwest one. I think it's because his other poems are more location specific. Like he mentions Ohio and the road sign. Like he actually names things instead of leaving them blank. I get the pros of making it more specific, but at the same time he also takes away like part of my imagination. You know, like when he like puts down a name.
Yeah, but I think that with poems, imagination exists in interpretation. So it might not be that the imagination is that like this is some space that I could imagine myself in. The imagination might be what it means to exist in a space like this that you maybe have never existed in before, right? And so it's also, you know, being open to the ways that someone is asking us to stretch our imagination. It's not always going to be the same. And that's also a sign of a great writer. Someone who can have us dexterously expand our imaginations and our thinking, right? I'll be real, if somebody would have told me probably 15 years ago that I would have been somebody who like really loves apparently reading about Ohio, because I love Dr. Grace's work, I love Hanif Abdul-Rakib's work, right? I probably would have told you no, right? Like, it's not a location I know very well. It's not a location that means a whole lot to me. Isn't that just like in the middle of nowhere? Like what? But because of their work, I've actually gained such love and respect for the places that they write about. And I think of place differently. I think of my own hometown differently because of how they write about their home. I think about the world differently. I think about this country differently because of how they write about Ohio, right? So I would also, you know, just push back a little bit, right, on what it means to believe that our imagination can only be or is only meant to be stretched in one way, right?
Going back to the stakes thing, you mentioned like you need to acknowledge that you're not the only person writing about this thing or place, and you're not the first, you won't be the last. So you need to address that. And I think this brings us into my question of creative redundancy. So like, you know that sentiment where it's like, okay, since there were so many writers before you, so many writers coexisting with you at the same time in history, and so many writers after you, you will not have an original experience. What you write would certainly, like your ideas and your writing would certainly be mirrored or like be based off of, or like unintentionally, like you would also unintentionally mirror someone else's, and that would create like, I don't know, controversy within your audiences. Like, what do you think of this notion of creative redundancy? Like, do you think we should heed it much, or do you think it's worth that much attention? Like, what's your opinion?
So two things, right? One, I was saying that you're not the only person to live there, not that you're not the only person to write about there, right? If we're talking about what it means for multiple people to write about the same place, I think that, and you kind of see this in this classroom, how you write about the nature and having been outside is very different than how Ira writes about the nature. And y'all were all in the same outside, right? So you literally see it, you know? And so my biggest thing always is that two people can live in the same place and have two very different experiences, because though there are like certain life events that are similar to many people, we all still experience them through our individual lens and our individual subjective experience. So it's not gonna be the same. It's just not, right? Like, I just brought up two writers who live in Ohio, Hanif Abdul-Rakib and Andy Grace. They do not write the same poem.
Yeah.
At all, right? Like, and I love them both. I love both of their work dearly, right? These are writers that I look to in terms of really considering what my poems could do, to push what my poems could do. And they do not write about Ohio the same way at all. Let's talk about my GOAT, who's from Ohio, Toni Morrison, who don't write like neither of them, right? Like, you know, they clearly learned from Toni Morrison, especially Hanif, right? Learned from Toni Morrison's writing, but how he writes, it's not how Toni Morrison writes, right? So I think that for me, the idea of creative redundancy it's not really a thing to me, to be honest with you. I don't believe in plagiarism, right? Like, I'm like, you need to write your own thing, right? But I believe that once you found your voice and once you're down to make writing your practice, how you write about the place that you're from or how you write about something, even if it's already written, is never going to be the same as how somebody else did it.
That's true. That's true. What's a piece of writing advice you have for upcoming poets and writers?
I mean, to write, you know, but also to read widely. That's the biggest advice that I received as a young writer, and it absolutely was one of the most life-changing pieces of advice that I received. Whether I like the writer, whether I hate the writer, whether I love the writer, what it means to read widely just gives you so much more to add to your toolbox. I could hate the writer, but I could see that they're doing something I've never tried. That they have a tool that I could maybe put into my toolbox and try out in my own work, right? And so that was like a huge, that as like, especially a young writer, was a huge help. The other thing is community. The only reason why I'm still here writing is because when I was your age, like how old are you?
I'm 17.
I thought so.
Yeah.
When I was 17, I was going to poetry workshops for teens. And a lot of those people are still my friends. And some of those people are still writing. Not all of them, but some of them are still writing. And because of that, I'm still here writing. So community and reading widely. Cultivate your community. Care about your community. Be good to your community. Pour into your community. And they'll pour back. Look, 2 is better than none.
That's true. That's true.
And I'll tell you right now, like, yes, I have, you know, a bunch of friends at the time when I was a teen, but it was me and my best friend. Like, it was our fervor, our hunger to be writers that kept me writing. Like, we would be up on Skype, right? Like, not Zoom, Skype. And we'd be coming up with prompts before we even really knew how to make up prompts, right? We would talk about the lyricism of Lupe Fiasco. We would talk about the lyricism of Nas. We talk about all this hip hop. We talk about all this music. And we'd use that to create prompts to write to. We'd write, she'd write really well. I'd write terrible poems, you know? Like on Skype with her, we'd give ourselves a prompt and we'd make ourselves write for 30 minutes. And then we'd get back on, you know? And that fueled my hunger, you know, that kept me writing when I thought that what I was doing was pretty silly, right? And because of that, I then wanted to keep writing. Even when we stopped doing Skype sessions, when she was writing across the country and I was writing across the country, the fact that she had joined her college slam team made me want to join my college slam team. Because I was like, I get to see my best friend and the school's gonna pay for it. You know, like, and so that kind of community kept me writing. I wouldn't be here doing it if it wasn't for even just that one person. And then I get to, you know, think about the other people too, of course, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But trust, like truly, you know, if you have a core group where it's you and 2 others, so you have 3 people, that's more than enough to have community, you know?
All right. Have you made up your mind of underrated?
I don't know. I think underrated is hard for me because there's so many poetic devices. And I actually think that a lot of them are utilized in some manner.
How about overrated?
Overrated. I think similes are overrated.
Similes?
Yeah. I think that we live in a time where there is a lot of like this use of, which I think can be counted in terms of simile, like, yeah. There's a lot of that like article usage that ends up still being kind of comparison. And I don't know if we need the of, you know, like I think that there could be something very fascinating about what it means to use the larger possibilities of metaphor and image, right? Like we talked about the difference, like what an image is, right? That it's that detail plus drama, right? Detail plus context. I think that there is so much there that can be really transcendent and doesn't always need the like. So if you're gonna use a simile, then I think it should be a strong choice. It should only come up a couple times maybe, right? Or you're gonna make a whole poem of similes, which can be interesting too. But I think just using them kind of cavalierly or loosely just because they're another device sometimes can take away from the impact of letting the image stand alone and create a larger metaphor.
Of course. I think adding I think changing the of, like specifically the of, or like, both works, just to a apostrophe s, that would make it much more interesting. Like,
It might.
yeah. And like a bit concise and a little bit more lyrical. So, but in my opinion, I'm not really that big a poem writer, so.
No, I'm like, literally try it out, right? I think something that I've been finding really fascinating is what it means to let an image just stand, right? Like, I think that sometimes we think that our audiences need to be handheld through traditional language usage. And I think that when we're down to actually get kind of weird with language and to really scrutinize the use of some of these articles, that things can get more surprising. Yeah.